The House will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Paige Mitchell, Jessica Crowler, Alex Bascodia, Logan Cotton, future Farmers of America from Sargent High School in Monte Vista, Colorado.
Thank you. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
School, please take the roll. Thank you. Logan.
Representatives Becker, Buck, Buckner, Conti.
I probably messed up your last name.
Representative Conti.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Oop. Absent.
And can I excuse quorum?
Yeah.
Quorum excused. Court. Del Grosso.
I'm going to go back in here.
Representative Conti is present. Del Grosso absent. Dorr. Duran. Everett. Absent. Exum. Fields. Fisher. Foote. Garcia. Gardner. Present. Giroux. Janal. Hamner. Representative Hamner. Present. Holbert. Hollinghorse. Humphrey. Present. Joshi. Representative Del Grosso is present. Kagan. Kraft-Tharp. Labuda. Excused. Landgraf. Lawrence. Lepsock. Lee. May. McCann. McLaughlin. McNulty. Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Murray. Navarro. Nordberg. Pabon. Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. President. Priola. Rankin. Rosenthal. Representative Rosenthal. Absent. Ryden. Sane. Salazar. Schaefer. Representative Schaefer. Representative Rosenthal is present. Representative Schaefer absent. Scott. Singer. Sonnenberg. Stevens. Swam. Zabo. Tyler. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Wilson. Present. Wright. Representative Wright is present. Young. Speaker Ferrandino.
Good morning, Corey. Who we got?
Schaefer and Everett absent. One excused.
Who's the excused?
Labuda. She turned in a phone last.
Oh, no, I must not have hit excused.
I think I'm keeping track of. Yeah, 61. With 61 members present, 2 excused and 2 absent, a quorum is present. Representative Navarro.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the reading of the journal for January 17th, 2014 be dispensed with and that it be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hey, last week of the stock show, and I'm thrilled to have a couple of folks with me today that were benefactors of what we did for raising money for the livestock sale. I have two people over here. I'm going to introduce both of them. Morgan Weinrich is a freshman attending Colorado State University with a double major in animal science and journalism. She's from Yuma, Colorado. She would like to thank each and every one of you for your continued support for the sponsorship and the scholarship trust for the National Western Stock Show. Help me say hello to Morgan right now. She's right over here. And Mr. Speaker, if I could continue. The other young lady over there is Megan Webb. Megan is also a graduate student in the meat science at Colorado State University. She is working with regard to her master's research focusing on beef flavor and quality and doing a focus with international trade and policy as well. She has also benefited from the stock show as well and the sale. Help me say hello to Megan as well, please.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Members, that's why the sale Friday is so important. That's why we participate as a chamber to help these young people raise money for scholarships so we can have people like these two young ladies carrying the banner for agriculture, for our food industry, for our meat industry. With your help, we can continue that this year. Now, right now, as of right now, we are at about 20% of what we raised last year. So here's my challenge to you. Any money that is raised this week from here on out, I will match. So if you bring me a check, whatever money you bring from here on out, I will match Friday for the sale. I would ask for your help. Thank you for your time, members.
Representative Sonnenberg, those introductions I do not think fell under the rules. So $5 to the stock show auction. Representative Vihel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Today I have the distinct pleasure of having the room full of Blue Jackets from the FFA from the San Luis Valley. We got some FFA members from Sargent School, Alamosa School, and I guess from Monte Vista as well. Just want to take the time to thank them for all they do. You guys are the future farmers, as it's indicated down there. So welcome to the state capitol, and we're just really pleased to have your presence here. And so you guys do a lot of great work, and thanks for coming down. So welcome to state capitol. If y'all give me a hand and welcome into FFA Kids from the Valley.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As an avid hunter, I've struggled throughout the years to try to figure out why anyone would think these bells would ever repel a bear. But in light of what happened this weekend, I would challenge you to all go back and find your bear bells and make them a Bronco bear bell. Go Broncos.
Representative Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind everybody Colorado Cattlemen's Association launches today across the street at the Scottish Rites Temple. It's a great event. Everybody should go.
Representative, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is another event that we've been talking about for the last several weeks. It's on your calendars because we emailed you, we've called you, we've asked you to be there. It's the International Business event tonight at 5:30, and I'm trying to pull up the details quickly. But this is an opportunity for you to get to meet those companies that are doing business in Colorado, engaging in international trade in Colorado and beyond. It's the World Trade Center legislative reception in the Hirschner Room, which is at the Wells Fargo building at 1700 Lincoln on the first floor. It's 5:30 to 7:30. It's a networking reception for the World Trade Center member companies. And this would be a great way for you to spend time with each other, seeing these companies. Representative Rosenthal and I have sponsored this event together tonight, and we very much look forward to seeing you there. So please, again, mark your calendars, 5:30 Wells Fargo in the Hirschner Room.
Representative Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just wanted to remind you that next Monday is our Military and Veterans Appreciation Day here in the House. And so if there are some resolutions circulating, if you have not had a chance to sign on, please see me. And also just be aware that it's next Monday, the 27th. Thank you.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee, please take a look at your calendar. We have 2 joint meetings with the Senate tomorrow. The first one is at 7:30 in room 107. We're going to have a briefing by the Air Quality Control Commission about air pollution control regulations, particularly affecting or dealing with natural gas and oil and gas development. And then upon adjournment, we'll meet again with the Senate committee in joint session, and this will be a mandatory meeting. And we'll receive a statutorily required presentation on the South Platte Groundwater Study Report pursuant to House Bill 1278 from the 2012 legislature. So roll call will be taken at both of those meetings, so please be there.
Representative Kagan.
House Judiciary Committee members, please note there is no meeting of the House Judiciary Committee today. We do anticipate a fairly full schedule on Thursday. No meeting today, members.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House proceed out of order for consideration of HJR 1003.
You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the House will proceed out of order for consideration of resolutions. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to HJR 1003.
House Joint Resolution 1003 by Representative Exum, also Senator Stedman, concerning the commemoration of the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Members, can we please return to our desks for consideration of resolutions? Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move SJR 141003 and ask that it be read at length.
Whereas the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929, graduated from Morehouse College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1948, graduated from Crozer Theological Seminary in 1951, and received a PhD from Boston University in 1955. And whereas Reverend Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott, a 13-month protest beginning December 5th, 1955, against the segregated city bus lines. And whereas the Montgomery bus boycott led to the integration of the Montgomery city bus system and is widely credited as the beginning of the civil rights movement in America. And whereas in 1957, Reverend Dr. King was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide leadership for the burgeoning civil rights movement. And whereas between 1957 and 1968, Reverend Dr. King spoke over 2,500 times, wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles, led protests, helped register African American voters, was arrested over 20 times, was awarded 5 honorary degrees, was named Man of the Year by Time magazine, and became the symbolic leader of the African American community as well as a world figure. And whereas on August 28, 1963, Reverend Dr. King directed the March on Washington, wherein more than 200,000 Americans gathered in the name of equality and civil rights, and which culminated in Reverend Dr. King's historic I Have a Dream speech. And whereas the leadership of Reverend Dr. King was instrumental in bringing about landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited segregation in public accommodations and facilities and banned discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which eliminated remaining legal barriers to voting for disenfranchised African American voters. And whereas in 1964, Reverend Dr. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his tireless and selfless work in the pursuit of justice for African Americans and other oppressed people in America. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's 13 years of nonviolent leadership ended abruptly and tragically when, on April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's birthday is a federal holiday in the United States and a state holiday in the state of Colorado, which is celebrated each year on the third Monday in January. And whereas on Monday, January 20th, 2014, we celebrated the 28th anniversary of Reverend Dr. King's holiday, now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, hereby encourage appropriate observances, ceremonies, and activities to commemorate the federal and state legal holiday honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. throughout all cities, towns, counties, school districts, and local governments within Colorado. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to President Barack Obama, the Congressional Black Caucus, the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, and Colorado's congressional delegation.
Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This resolution is being brought as we celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday on yesterday with a lot of events all around the state. And as I thought about it, and as I make my remarks, I was thinking about one of the key aspects of Dr. King's legacy was the passage of the Voting Rights Act, which was signed into law by President Johnson on August 6, 1965. And the Voting Rights Act was passed to enforce the constitutional rights of equal protection and can't even say the word, under the 14th and 15th Amendment. And at that time, when African Americans and other people of color were being systematically denied the right to vote through violence and intimidation. And when it was passed, it had immediate impact across the nation, suspension of literacy tests, and other methods of disenfranchisement. Federal examiners and observers were appointed to oversee registration procedures. And on this day, we must remember the importance of carrying Dr. King's legacy by fighting for equality for all members of our society, respect and dignity for all people, inclusive of all races, genders, and diversity in general, the power of nonviolent protests to effect change. We must keep our determination and persistence in the pursuit of these goals. Dr. King said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And the impact that this had on my life, I was one of the beneficiaries of things that happened during the Civil Rights Movement. It gave me an opportunity to pursue a career in the fire service, and I stand on the shoulders of those that fought for the Voting Rights Act as I stand in this chamber today as your representative. Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, on this 28th year of celebrating the Martin Luther King holiday in Colorado and the 85th year of life and greatness of the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. arrives with its usual celebrations. Yesterday, here in Denver, we celebrated his life with prayers, songs, speeches, and the annual parade. It's an annual exercise that brings us the kind reflection we need as a community, as fellow citizens, and as human beings. Yet, that's just the exercise. It's just the expression of our needed desire for racial harmony and our quest for lasting social peace. That's what we say, but there is still much to do. In Colorado, we have come so far. The simple act of these short remarks before you today is remarkable, considering 400-year-long chapter that begins in slavery, but it ends in the brilliance of democracy and our freedom. The stories of courage, progress, and the fight to preserve our humanity should be something all Coloradans must not forget. That pride is channeled through our observance of Reverend King's memory and his fight for the national soul. His birthday, however, is not the end of the struggle. The work of those before us is far, far from over. We cannot be satisfied with Dr. King's memory when his goal of completeness of his vision remains elusive. Colorado went the distance, my colleagues, in this chamber. In this city, in this state, past and present are products of that. But Colorado, we have not finished the trip. Our education gaps appear to widen. Our child poverty rate is near 20%. Inequality is much more prevalent now than it was 44 years ago. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent on things that matter, Martin Luther King once said. That's what we must fight against, my colleagues, the silence. We must continue to fight for what matters in our great state. It's a commitment that we've made throughout the years of community and public service, and it's what we must recognize as Colorado's most important priority. Recently, I found myself reflecting on that commitment while visiting the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. As I viewed the antique automobiles that King and his supporters used parked outside of the Lorraine Hotel, and as I viewed room 306 where this soldier of freedom slept, and as I stood on the balcony at the same spot where his life was callously robbed, I thought about the passion and I thought about the sacrifice. The passion and the sacrifice that has brought me here. The passion and the sacrifice that gives us strength to do what we must do in the best interest of Colorado citizens. The passion and the sacrifice that actually made my visit possible to Memphis, Tennessee. And the passion and the sacrifice to serve as an African-American elected official in the great state of Colorado. Today, fellow colleagues, we must do more than just honor and mourn the life of Martin Luther King. We must do more to celebrate it. We must actually strive to live it. To live the fight for civil rights and equality for those who have been underserved and disadvantaged for too long. To live for our neighbors of color, to demand opportunity and prosperity for all. We must do so in the urgency of now and in the proud spirit of Colorado. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. I'm here to talk about and to remember and honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, because when I think about Dr. King, I think about him beyond the "I have a dream" speech. I think of him as a man and what he stood for. And what he stood for was justice and fairness for all. If you think about it, he was born in 1929. He graduated from Morehouse College in 1948. And if you understood what the world was like then, it was separate and it was not equal. He looked at the world and he decided that he wanted to change it, because at that time, hospitals were for white onlys and they had hospitals for black onlys. They had water fountains and restrooms that had signs on them that said white only and black only. And he said that that has to change. So when I think about Dr. Martin Luther King, I remember his words when he said that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. So I remember what he stood for, and that was fairness and equality, and something that we still need to be mindful of today. I do remember also his commitment to service. He was a great man of service for his community. And what he said is that we could all be great because we could all serve. And when he did give that I Have a Dream speech, I remember that speech. I was probably around 9, 10 years old. And when he said that he visioned a world where his 3 girls will be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin, I felt like he was speaking to me. That speech empowered me that someday I would be judged not by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character. So I stand on the shoulders of Dr. Martin Luther King and all those who chose to survive so I could be here today. Thank you.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to point out that for those of us of a certain age who lived through the 60s, Martin Luther King Jr. was everyone's hero. He spoke about the need for justice for everyone, and I want to be certain that we all remember, because my colleagues here have all quoted that, and I want to be certain that all of you remember that for so many of us who grew up in that era, he spoke as our hero, as the entire nation's hero. He was an absolutely mesmerizing individual. And when I went to the Lorraine Motel, I have to tell you a story. I was talking about going to Memphis and having only one day on this trip in Memphis to a friend of mine, an African-American man. And I said, John, I have a dilemma. I can either go to the Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel, or I can go to Graceland, but I can't do both in one day. And he said, I know what you're going to do. You're going to go to the Lorraine Motel, but any real American would go to Graceland. He was, of course, being facetious. He was teasing me. But he was also my age, and he knew how important Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy is for all Americans. Thank you.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The civil rights movement was happening just before I was sort of aware of political activity and was not involved, but every time I see something on television to try to describe what was going on behind the scenes, I'm riveted by the reality that blacks were living in back then. And, you know, I really do believe that God delivers special people to us at special times. And I believe that Martin Luther King was one of those people. That there was a pent-up need, there was a pent-up demand. The anger was getting to a level that just couldn't be stopped anymore. And who came along but a very gifted man who said, we can do this. We've been raising our children to be ready for this day. I mean, for Pete's sake, he graduated from college. I've learned about how, you know, I wasn't raised among a lot of middle-class blacks, if you will, or working-class blacks, and they kept telling their children, our day will come. Well, they needed that person to take them where they needed to go, and Martin Luther King was that individual. I really took comfort in Representative Williams' comment about the importance of education. That's why I am so driven to make sure that every child receives the education they deserve in this country, and that we can't say because a child's skin color is a certain color that they can't learn or they don't deserve the best teachers and the best schools that we can offer them. So I think as we take comfort from the fact that Martin Luther King has brought us to a different place, we have a long way to go to bring those children out of poverty who deserve that Moorhead College type education and who are currently not being given that privilege. Thank you for carrying this resolution.
Representative Hobart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a child of the 60s, just barely, born in 1961, I'm one of the youngest people I've met or have known, I guess I can meet myself, who remembers the fear and trauma of the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. We saw on television, being the first generation to have that readily available in our living rooms, the death of his brother Robert and Governor Wallace, and also the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Those things touched our families, our households, through a medium which really hadn't existed in the generation prior. In my growing up, I had opportunity to live in South Carolina in a very blended community, and really became aware that some people did judge others based on the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. That was not how I was brought up, and I never really understood that until I experienced it head on. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King allows us to remember and really ponder a couple of important things that come to us in the human experience. One, we've been reminded by Lincoln and others that we are all created equal. And for the agnostic, the atheist, that might be an uncomfortable thing and easily dismissed, but I embrace it fully. I believe that we are truly created equal. And the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King helped remind people of my color of that. And it's for that reason that I want to support this and encourage us all to consider that Martin Luther King was not just a leader of a part of society, the African American culture. I was brought up to say black heritage, food, the culture. In the South, the black churches made the churches that my family attended look lame in comparison. What a joy to understand that culture. So today, when we remember Dr. Martin Luther King, I ask, let's recognize his greatness as a leader of that community, African American, or if you'll allow me, my heritage, black, because there's treasure in that. But let us also recognize a greater aspect of Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a great leader of all men and women. We are created equal, but he gives an example of someone who goes far above the average, that sets a standard that we will remember for generations. And I'll be proud to vote yes and be a co-sponsor on this bill. And thank you so much to the sponsors and those who have spoken before. Let us all remember the greatness of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to come down and share in this House Joint Resolution with my friends and colleagues. It was an honor to be at the City Park yesterday as we joined in the parade with my wife and my 14-month-old son in that celebration and a little bit of cold. And what struck me yesterday and what strikes me today, and frankly a lot in this chamber, is the message that Martin Luther King delivers to us almost daily. And if you look at his bio and you look at the history of where he came from and what he's done, it's a lesson in change, it's a lesson in persistence, and it tells you a couple things. It tells you that change has never been easy, that it's not simple, and it's not without controversy. It requires persistence. It requires determination. And if you consider the time that it took from the overturn of separate but equal in Brown versus Board of Education to the Voting Rights Amendment, it was over 10 years. And Martin Luther King never gave up. He was more emboldened as each year passed, and it is truly a testament to what it takes to make change in our own world, in our own state, in this chamber. And we've seen that change in our own history, in our own Colorado history, because there was a time when Martin Luther King Day was not recognized by the state of Colorado. And it took 10 years of persistence, of change, of momentum, and thankfully to Representative Webb, with her determination and persistence, we now celebrate this day. We have this history in our own chamber. And so as you think about the next civil rights movement, as you think about where we're going next, whether it's full marriage equality, whether it's full educational opportunity, whatever that is, we are in the midst of making that history for all of us. So it's an honor and a privilege to recognize Martin Luther King today, to remember his persistence and his tenacity in making change and reminding us that we must do the same in order to reach that mountaintop that he has always wanted us to reach. Thank you.
Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in support of this resolution, mainly because of what Dr. King and his work and his words have meant to me growing up in my life. Beyond the work that he did in civil rights and moving us forward and desegregating our country, he had a personal influence over my life. I truly would not be standing here addressing this body right now had he not been an inspiration to me. And I want to just share some words that he said that truly kept me motivated and going and working towards improving myself, and I hope that they'll be just as inspirational to you. In 1967, he spoke before a middle school, and he was telling students to be the best at whatever you do. He said that when you discover what you will be in your life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you at this particular moment in history to do it. Don't just set out to do a good job. Set out to do such a good job that the dead and the unborn couldn't do it any better. If it falls to you to be a street sweeper, then sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry, and sweep streets so well that all the hosts in heaven and earth will pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. Say that 3 times fast. In those words, I was a middle school student about to enter high school, and every day that I approached my schoolwork, I said, I want to make sure that I'm the best. Even if I don't necessarily reach those heights, as long as I set my goal to that, then I can't fail. And so for him on this day, I am so glad that we were able to recognize the work that he did and the inspiration that he gave, hopefully each and every one of us. Thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank all of you for bringing and sponsoring this resolution. I, on this day and this week and in this month, reflect a great deal on the struggle of Dr. King, but the struggle of Dr. King not only with America at large, but also within his own community. Because it is so instructive to each and every one of us as we deal with our own community, our own party, our own state, our own nation. And this may come as a surprise to some of you or not, I've been heavily influenced by Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. If you've not read it or you've not read it recently, read it. In what he said was the longest letter, I think the longest letter he had ever written, there are volumes of philosophy about nonviolent resistance to immoral codes that persist in our society. Dr. King was criticized, actually, by his fellow ministers for being in Birmingham in 1963 because they thought it was, quote, unwise and untimely. Why are you in Birmingham, Martin? You're only going to cause more trouble for us. And his response in that letter was, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. And he goes on to talk about a really deep philosophic thing about should we use immoral means to achieve moral ends. That is, should we engage in violence to achieve moral ends? And in his view, that was wrong. But even deeper was a point that he made about the use of moral ends. I think his reference to the law and to use of civil order and so forth to attain immoral ends as well, which was what the prevailing code was in society, particularly in the South, but all over America, and frankly throughout the world. I reread the letter yesterday. I find something new every time I read the letter, but I always come back to that statement that he makes early in the letter in response to, why are you in Birmingham? I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. And I support this resolution. Thank you.
Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution. And I want to acknowledge not only Dr. Martin Luther King, but the people who followed Dr. Martin Luther King. It was a difficult stance for an entire generation of people to support the positions of Dr. Martin Luther King that led them into circumstances where they were exposing themselves to the injustices of the time and the code of behavior of the time. So I want to acknowledge those followers. I also want to say that generationally, there are responsibilities. And the generation of Dr. Martin Luther King worked very hard to establish a society that eliminated segregation as a legal part of our society. Today, we have responsibilities also. We are the continuation, and our generation, quite frankly, needs to do more. We need to fight more. We need to make certain that not only do we recognize the diversity that is the strength of our nation, but that we celebrate that diversity, that we cause every American, regardless of the differences, to be beneficiaries of what we all consider to be the greatest nation on the face of the earth. The fact of the matter is that in order for that to happen, we have to celebrate the very thing that makes us unique, and that is the diversity that comes with being an American. If we don't do that, then we have not continued our responsibility to the generation that sacrificed so much to do what we see as lay the foundation. When my grandchildren are considered in the future, they will have other challenges. But now it's our turn. Now we're the adults, and we need to further the cause that Dr. Martin Luther King started, and to make sure that it never stops, that it's never completed until we get to the point that we actually live up to the creed that we have in place. I greatly am influenced with Dr. Martin Luther King, and I look forward to continuing this effort to make certain that our world is a better place for everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to taking a voice vote? Seeing none, we'll proceed in that manner. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The House Joint Resolution 1003 is passed. Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the current roll call of the House be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call of the House will be made co-sponsors of HJR 1003. Thank you, Representative Exum. We will proceed to our next order of business, third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1078. House Bill 1078, Representative Pedersen, all Senator Johnson, concerning changes to public education accreditation statutes as a result of legislative review of the rules of the State Board of Education in connection with clarifying the Sharon Public School and the accreditation statutes and allowing automatic renewal of the accreditation contract for an entity with an improvement plan. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1078 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for Representative Wilson.
W. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I would urge your no vote on this particular bill. If you check in the reading, it adds 3 words, with improvement plan, on the second part of it. For those of you that may not be aware of what that is and how that works, the current statute reads that each school district will be automatically renewed as long as they are in the category of accredited or higher. Those 2 categories, accredited with distinction, meets or exceeds statewide targets. They have a performance plan. Accredited meets statewide targets. They have a performance plan. Accredited with improvement plan, which this would add to the statute, did not meet statewide targets, and they have an improvement plan, not a performance plan. To me, this is like the Olympic time trials, where we qualify the top 2 athletes in a time trial. And now we're saying just because you need to improve a little, we'll include you in the same top 2 and qualify you. As we said on the farm, that ain't right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Pedersen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Wilson, for your concerns. I think that your concerns are outside of what this bill does. This doesn't actually change any substance. This is really just streamlining processes, and I ask for your support. Thank you so much.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I voted yes in committee for this bill, but I've been convinced by Representative Wilson's need to discuss the second part of this bill, and so I urge a no vote because I think we need to discuss the accreditation part of this bill a little bit more. I urge a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1078 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Fields. Close the machine. With 36 aye votes, 26 no votes, 2 excused, and 1 absent, House Bill 1078 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1053.
House Bill 1053, by Representative McCannell, Senator Aguilar, concerning the authority of the Commissioner of Insurance to adopt rules to ensure consistent requirements for pediatric dental benefits and health benefit plans offered in Colorado, regardless of the method by which a plan is purchased.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1053 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I do not rise to urge a particular vote on House Bill 1053, but rather to simply say why, although somewhat difficult, I will be a yes vote on 1053. It would be the easiest thing in the world, a throwaway almost, to vote no, because those of us who oppose and believe that the Affordable Care Act is in fact unconstitutional have a tendency to vote in the negative on anything that involves the Affordable Care Act. And if I lived in a binary world, one in which things were always simple yeses and nos, it would be an easy no. And let me clarify for the record and the people of Colorado, I do in fact believe that the Federal Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional. I do in fact believe that Chief Justice John Roberts, with all respect to him and his position, nevertheless got it wrong. It would not be the first time the United States Supreme Court did that. However, the United States Supreme Court decided as it did, and it became
the law of the land, however right or wrong it might be. And we are stuck with dealing with it. I voted against Senate Bill 200 for the creation of the Colorado Insurance Exchange and thought that we would never see an exchange because I thought the United States Supreme Court would do otherwise, but they did not. And so then I found myself in the unenviable, and believe me, unenviable position of chairing the Implementation Review Committee to see that the exchange worked. And it has worked much better than the federal exchange. And while I would prefer the world to be different, I do not live in a binary world. And it is the world in which we live and we must deal. Which brings me, and I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, and allow me to sort of discuss that background, which brings me to House Bill 1053. What is it about? Well, it's not about the legislature of the state of Colorado deciding that pediatric dental benefits are going to be offered or not. We're not debating that today because as much as I believe that pediatric dental care is a good thing, I always pause whenever we mandate additional coverages in health care. And I think the debate of late last year informs us that the people of the United States and of Colorado would like to have better choice over what their health care includes. And it affects cost and the actuarial analysis, everything about it, as people now know, if they did not before. But here's the problem. It's the problem I have, we have, the problem that is before us. And that is that the Affordable Care Act is the law. And I wish it were otherwise, and I will strive to make it otherwise. But for the moment, I have to deal with the world as it is, not as I wish it to be. And what we have is a set of federal regulations. This is what these things create. Released last spring that creates an inconsistency around pediatric dental within the so-called essential health benefits. Now, this one's pretty ironic for someone in my position, because one of the things that we said about the implementation that we didn't want to do was that healthcare plans inside the exchange, that is offered in the exchange, needed to be the same as healthcare plans outside the exchange. In other words, the exchange should be a neutral marketplace. It shouldn't have advantages over plans outside the exchange. It shouldn't be disadvantaged either. It should be a level playing field. Well, the irony here is that under the federal regulations, the pediatric dental benefit is required to be purchased outside the exchange, and it's only required to be offered as a benefit inside the exchange. So what does that mean for someone like me that actually opposes the Affordable Care Act? Well, what it means is we've given the exchange actually an advantage over the free marketplace. It's far too nuanced, I think, sometimes for the debate, because you need to sit at your desk and think about that for a little while. And the fact of the matter is, our current situation sort of advantages the healthcare exchange over the free market. And by the way, we made the exchange as free a market as it possibly could be, but it's now advantaged. And that needs to not be the case. And House Bill 1053 requires the exchange to not simply offer, but to require the benefit, and it levels the playing field. It is not, in my mind, a vote on whether I think the Affordable Care Act is a good idea or right or constitutional, or that I don't think it's going to collapse of its own weight, because I firmly believe that it will. But in the meantime, I do not believe that we ought to penalize insurance brokers outside the exchange and insurance companies outside the exchange and advantage the exchange over them. In fact, the exchange, I think, does not want that. And so for that reason, I'm going to be a yes. And I'm sure that I will answer this question 1,000 times over at some time in the future if I should ever, upon term limits, run for anything, even dog catcher, in the state of Colorado. But I will answer it because it is logical and it is where we are, not where I would like to be. And I will continue to work for health care reform that is meaningful and workable. And I do not believe that to be the Affordable Care Act, but I do believe we should have parity within and outside the exchange. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, colleagues, for your indulgence.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1053 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Sane, Waller. Close the machine. With 41 aye votes, 22 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1053 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Members, just a reminder on third reading, Rule 33E, during third reading of bills, members shall not use any electronic device for the purpose of transmitting or receiving voice or data communications, including but not limited to electronic mail and text messaging. That does include Twitter, so don't be tweeting during third reading, members, please. Thank you. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1019.
House Bill 1019 by Representative Gardner, also Senator Stedman, concerning the enactment of Colorado Revised Statutes 2013 as the positive and statutory law of the state of Colorado.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1019 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1019 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 0 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1019 is adopted. Close the machine. Announcements and introductions. Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues, you should have received an invitation about a very special caucus meeting that's starting tomorrow morning. The topic is childhood obesity prevention. And I am encouraging you to get this meeting on your calendar, not only because of the healthy breakfast that will be provided, but if you need another reason for arriving tomorrow at 7:15 a.m., that would be a good one. So we'll be downstairs in HCR 112. And the topic tomorrow is raising awareness about the issue of childhood obesity in Colorado. We'll have Kaiser Permanente, Denver Metro Economic Development, and Mission Readiness as our speakers to help us raise awareness about some of the issues around childhood obesity. There will be 4 additional sessions every other Wednesday morning, so I hope you can join us tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Finance Committee members might be paying attention tomorrow. Our 1:30 afternoon meeting, we will not be hearing 1073. We will hear 1020 and 1074. Thank you.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Joint Budget Committee, we will not meet until 2 p.m. today. Thank you.
Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing none, Madam Majority Leader. Or Mr. Assistant Majority Leader. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader? Can you just recess us till 1?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until 1 p.m. today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess till 1 p.m. You do not need to be back until, we can do that later. We'll do that later. The House will stand in recess till 1 p.m. today.